This is the special contribution from the rapporteur that has been written in May 30, 2013. Very, very interesting and very detailed. Thank you. Now that we have all the UN opinions, and I'm very, very anxious, and I'm sure you all are as anxious as I am to hear from our distinguished judges. So with great, great pleasure, I would like to introduce to you Judge Kathy Hollenberg-Surratt, a Circuit Court Judge of the 7th Judicial Circuit of Maryland. She is the Family Division Coordinating Judge for the Circuit Court for Prince George County. A member of the Maryland Court of Appeals Standing Committee on Pro Bono Legal Services. Judge Surratt received a B.S. Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude from the University of Pittsburgh, a JD from the National Law Center, George Washington University, and an LLM in International Legal Studies from American University, Washington College of Law. She is the recipient of many awards, to mention a few: the Maryland Women's Bar Association Pro Bono Award, Prince George County Bar Association Distinguished Services Award, Daily Record Leadership in Law Award 2012. Please welcome with me Judge Kathy Surratt.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you all for this opportunity to speak about women's human rights and traditional values and culture. Much has been written and much has been said on the tension between women's human rights and what has been termed in these days as cultural relativism. However, both women's rights and cultural integrity are protected by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As has been said here today, culture, like all of life, is not static, but ever evolving. Prior to the mid-1800s, most legal systems accepted wife-beating as a valid exercise of husbands' authority over wives. Political agitation eventually led to changes in both popular opinion and legislation regarding domestic violence. In 1994, the Violence Against Women Act was signed into law in the United States, providing criminal prosecution of violent crimes against women, as well as civil remedies and funding for programs for victims of domestic violence. To be sure, the culture of acceptance of violence against women in the United States had changed. The Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized in 2000 and again in 2005. But when it came up for reauthorization in 2012, reauthorization was hotly contested. Why? Critics objected to provisions which would expand the law's protections to illegal immigrants, gays and lesbians, and American Indians, who would have greater authority to prosecute non-Indians who committed crimes against Indian women. Thus, while domestic violence had become unacceptable as regards some women in the United States, it had not yet become so as to all. Despite the attempts to withhold the law's protections from targeted populations, the Violence Against Women Act was finally reauthorized. President Obama proclaimed at the time, "Since the passage of the Violence Against Women Act nearly 20 years ago, our nation's response to domestic violence has greatly improved. What was too often seen as a private matter, best hidden behind closed doors, is now established as a national concern. We have changed our laws, transformed our culture, and improved support services for survivors." As said, culture is not static, and ours has transformed significantly through the struggles of women and their supporters who have won federal and state laws addressing the issue of domestic violence and thereby changing our culture. Yet even in the face of these laws, it is reported that every day in the United States, approximately 3 women are killed through domestic violence. Annually, that's approximately 1,100 women killed by family members. The National Network to End Domestic Violence reported that violence against women is pervasive throughout the United States. 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence at some point in their lives. The network decided to do a survey to look at the status of victims of domestic violence in the United States on a single day and chose September 12, 2012. What did they find? In just that one day in the United States, 35,323 women were found to have to take refuge in emergency shelters. 4 women were killed that day from domestic violence. Last year in my state, Maryland, where I sit on the bench, there were 31,124 petitions for protective orders from domestic violence. Thus, while our culture has transformed significantly, we still have a far way to go in the United States to change the culture of violence in general and the culture of violence against women in particular. Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights guarantees everyone the right to life, liberty, and security of person. That is a fundamental human right yet to be achieved in the United States or elsewhere around the world. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted by the UN in 1948, grew out of the atrocities of the Second World War and the hope to avoid future such atrocities in the world. It recognized the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. It understood the need for the adoption of a common understanding of these rights and a common standard of achievement for all people and all nations. Similarly, the overwhelming number of countries around the world have agreed to be bound by the provisions of CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and the General Assembly further strengthened CEDAW in 1993 with the adoption of the Declaration of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, which recognized the urgent need for the universal application to women of the rights and principles with regard to equality, security, liberty, integrity, and the dignity of all human beings. In other words, as has been widely recognized, international human rights norms have moral authority because they constitute the world community's consensus regarding the ethical behavior that is due to human beings by their governments. Violence against women cannot be justified as cultural. Denial of education and children marriages cannot be justified as cultural. According to the United Nations Population Fund, between 2001 and 2020, more than 140 million girls worldwide will become child brides. They will effectively end their education. They will not be able to continue their vocational and life skills, and they will be subjected too early to HIV, sexual violence, pregnancy, and childbearing. Indeed, complications from pregnancy and childbirth is a leading cause of death for girls between 15 and 19 years of age in developing countries. These are human rights issues, and women's human rights are being addressed by indigenous women throughout the world. Whether it's Malala in Pakistan, Wangari Maathai in Kenya, the women here on this panel, those of you who have come to see this presentation, thousands of other people and millions of women throughout the world, struggling to make human rights an integral part of culture. So what is our responsibility? To support the indigenous struggles for human rights internationally and at home. There are countless opportunities to do so. Just mentioning just 2 briefly that I'm involved with. The International Association of Women Judges developed a jurisprudence of equality program to bring international human rights into courtrooms around the world, addressing such issues as child sexual abuse, women's property rights, human trafficking. State courts are increasingly adopting a human rights framework to look at the issues of economic rights, social rights of women and individuals throughout the world. In my jurisdiction, we're developing a family justice center for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Our cultures are evolving. Women must have a strong voice in that evolution so that the fundamental well-being and dignity of everyone, young and old, male and female, as envisioned in our internationally adopted human rights norms, which of themselves will no doubt evolve, can become a reality for all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Judge Kathy. I have to share something also with you. Over the years, I'm Lebanese American, and I was born in Lebanon, and I've been here most of my life. And of course, I've been working towards all these issues, especially equality for women and so on. And I hear this over and over again from a lot of people. They say, poor women in the Middle East, they are treated so badly, the religion is so treating them badly. And I say, trust me, they don't have a monopoly on suffering. It is an issue all over the world, trust me, including this country that we are in, which is supposed to be the most powerful country on earth, yet we still have violence and we still have inequality even in pay for women. So, and it is so refreshing for everybody to hear this from a judge who is here in the American circuit. So thank you. Now it's another big pleasure for me to introduce to you another panelist, the Honorable Judge Mumtaz Barry Brown. She is an administrative law judge. She is a graduate of Rutgers Law School in Newark, New Jersey, and Howard University in Washington, D.C. She's admitted to practice law in New Jersey and New York. She was appointed an administrative law judge in 1990. For the past 24 years, as an administrative law judge, Judge Barry Brown has provided citizens of New Jersey a forum for fair and impartial resolution of dispute arising from agency actions. Judge Barry Brown has made a direct and significant difference in the lives of women victimized by domestic violence and illegal discrimination. Please welcome with me Judge Mumtaz.
Thank you very much, Sally, Ambassador, Ms. Puri, and my colleague, Kathy, and distinguished guests. I am humbled and honored to be part of this panel on traditional values, culture, and women's human rights. Like many of you, I wear several hats. I am mother, administrative law judge for the state of New Jersey, attorney, member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the Links Incorporated, each a nonprofit service organization which claims more than 10,000 females. I am Christian and I am woman. In any of these roles, my everyday thoughts, decisions, and conduct include the use, or at least the recognition, of traditional values and the guaranteed human right to think, to speak, and act. Often, I am not conscious of the effect of my cultural or religious values on my behavior, and perhaps that's because they are usually in harmony. However, there have been occasions when I am keenly aware, either personally or professionally, that traditional values and culture cannot coexist with guaranteed human rights. When traditional values conflict with guaranteed human rights, then we must make a choice. When traditional values threaten to diminish, undermine, and weaken guaranteed human rights, then we must pause, re-examine, and claim our stake in our innate right to freedom, justice, and equality. When traditional values seek to overthrow or abolish human rights, ladies and gentlemen, we must take a stand. The choice is evident. The position is traditional values and culture must yield to support human rights for all peoples of the world. On September 27, 2012, United States Ambassador Eileen Chamberlain clearly explained our position at the 21st session regarding the resolution entitled Promoting Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms Through a Better Understanding of Traditional Values of Humankind as mentioned. I summarize the Ambassador's affirmation. The concept of traditional values not anchored to or in conformity with human rights law undermines the principles enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and can have a negative effect on the rights of women, minorities, LGBT, and other vulnerable groups. The Ambassador further stated the term traditional values has no international agreed upon definition and can be easily used to legitimize human right abuses. I agree with the Ambassador. Some practices and the attitudes that's mentioned are at odds with human dignity. Those who challenge gender roles reinforced by values are subject to violence and abuse. Traditional and cultural values can bring very harmful practices, including domestic violence. However, I believe traditional values and human rights are able to coexist as they do under contracts between governments and its citizens. Take, for example, the United States Constitution, which includes the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of press, religion, the right to a speedy trial. The U.S. Constitution eventually abolished slavery under the 13th Amendment, followed by the 14th Amendment, which guarantees all citizens equal rights, and the 15th Amendment, which guaranteed former slaves suffrage or the right to vote in public election. Still, I am mindful and observant of the legacy that foreshadows the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments, which are also called the Reconstruction Amendments. Just want to share two examples. In the state of Carolina, North Carolina, in 1829, Elizabeth Jones owned a slave named Lydia. Jones hired Lydia out for a year to John Mann. Lydia was not happy with the arrangement, and at one point, John Mann decided to punish her by whipping her. Lydia tried to escape. John Mann allegedly told her to stop. She would not. He then shot and wounded her. Now, unusual for that day, he was arrested and charged with assault and battery. And the jury had to decide if the punishment which John Mann inflicted on the slave was cruel and disproportionate to the defense. And they found that it was, and concluded that he was guilty. John Mann appealed to the Supreme Court of North Carolina. The chief judge there, a Southerner with very little sympathy for slavery, rendered a powerful and logical pro-slavery opinion. Much of it focused on the fact that slavery was legal in North Carolina. And the court said, it is compelled to express the opinion upon the extent of domination that the master has over the slave. Although John Mann did not own Lydia, and Elizabeth Jones might be able to sue him for damaging her property, John Mann had complete control over Lydia, even though he was not legally hers for keeps. The question then was, how much force could a master use against his slave? The court said Slavery was designed for the good of the master and not for the good of the slave. In order for the master to have full benefit of his slave, he had to be able to break the slave's will, to make the slave obey him. And the court would not interfere with the master's power over the slave. The court concluded a slave to remain a slave must be made sensible, and there is no appeal to the master. Now, akin to our 13th Amendment of the Constitution, or Articles 3, 4, and 5, which have been mentioned, and it states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. And Article 5, no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. Indeed, traditional values are frequently invoked to justify human rights violations against women and girls. That's why we're here. And let us be mindful that women are not the only victims. Just want to go over another quick example. In 1854, in California, the Supreme Court ruled that the testimony of a Chinese man who witnessed a murder by a white man was inadmissible. The ruling was largely based on the prevailing opinion that Chinese people were inferior, and they were an inferior race. The court stated, well, Section 39 of our law states that no Indian or Negro shall be allowed to testify as a witness in any action or proceeding in which a white person is a party. And Article 14 of our law states that no black or mulatto person or Indian shall be allowed to give evidence in favor of or against a white man. And although Chinese people were not mentioned in the law, the court said we cannot go against tradition or public policy. Indeed, to allow these Chinese people to testify would admit them to all the equal rights of citizenship. We might soon see them at the polls, in the jury box, and upon the bench, and in our legislative halls. This is an actual and present danger. The Chinese are a race of people who by nature are inferior and who are incapable of progress or intellectual growth. They differ in language, in color, opinions, and physical conformation. And they're now trying to claim not only the right to swear away the right of a citizen, a white citizen, but the further privilege of participating with us in administering the affairs of our government. Surely there's no doubt the legislature did not intend for this to happen. So, as been said, women are subject to sexual violence in America too. Even though we have had laws, we have yet a long way to go. Sexual violence against women remain epic and endemic in the United States. 1 in 4 women are beaten, abused, stalked, and suffer more from traumatic effect. New Jersey, I am pleased, has enacted the Domestic Violence Act, and it has placed places for women to go that are safe. Victims of domestic violence come from all social and economic backgrounds. And in New Jersey, as an administrative law judge, I am able to impact many women over the years. Honored guests, there are ways that you and I can influence how survivors of violence against women are treated by the types of services they receive. We must advocate and use our groups and our voices to identify the nature of the problem, what legislation is needed to address the problems, and the funding required to provide services. As an administrative law judge, in our human services cases, We were able to order safe housing for women and their children, traditional meals through food stamps, and proper medical care through Medicaid. We are able to order laws in our Civil Rights Department to compensate women who have been denied equal rights in employment and education on the basis of sex and gender. So whenever traditional values threaten to diminish, undermine, or weaken guaranteed human rights, every person in this room is asked to step up and go forward to stop this infringement. And it need not be a big step. Simply put, whenever human rights are trumped by traditional values, just say no more. No more. No more. In conclusion, I ask that each of you say a prayer for those we have lost to domestic violence, and to every survivor who continues on her journey with the hope and the belief that life is still good, just different. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Mumtaz. It's excellent. Now you have an idea and the feelings and what the laws are and what we all are trying to promote. And so please follow what she was asking you and follow your heart in pursuing anything against women that is not rightfully so. Please speak about it and talk about it. We would have a few minutes to have a few questions because of the time. So maybe we can have 3 questions, straight question, no statement, please. So if anybody wish to ask a question, please raise your hands. State your name, sir, and your question.
Joel Charles, I'm from Haiti, and I'm the president of INCA, Initiative Nationale.
Please.
Initiative Nationale pour la coordination de l'action haïtienne et ci-devant Initiative Nationale pour la coordination de l'aide humanitaire américaine. J'ai 2 questions. La première,
I can speak
in French.
English,
in
please.
English.
Yes, so we don't have interpretation.
I have 2 questions. The first question is for Judge, excuse me, hold on my glass. For the judge, we heard your expose, it was very bright, and I would like to ask you, what do you do in your capacity, and what do you suggest the United Nations to do as far as the approach of American to withdraw the right of vote for blacks, and if women is not black, white, colored, or not even threatened by the same aspect, since we're talking about human rights. That's my first question. As far as white human rights is concerned, what do you do as a body, to stop or to eliminate this tendency? Because myself, as from Haiti, I'm very concerned. As far as white, because Haiti is part of the Pan-Americanism. Second question, for my second heart, as a physician and as the director of INCA, we have women empowerment, women group, and we have done mobile clinic to go to the 10th city and to go to the slum area. 10th city resulted from the earthquake. And remote area and new remote area that were created by the displacement of the people from the 10 cities, and also in the deprived places in the community, in the population. And we have found among the population, we have seen 78% were women, and in the 71% that we saw that was women, 79% of the women, including young girls and girls, present STD and vaginitis due to many causes. Some have to have sex, unwanted or wanted for money, probably water, and etc. I would love to have some of your
Thank you.
advice
Thank
in
you.
that matter. Thank you.
Which one? You want to? Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, if I understood the question, you're asking what advice I would give? Is that it? Yes.
Right of vote for blacks in general.
All right.
How do you feel about women fighting for the same man, for the same
Thank you.
movement?
I'm going to take one more question and then we can answer everything. Anyone else would like to speak? Please, the lady over there.
So, Sarah Begum, former member of the UN CEDAW committee. Yes. We know that violence against women occurs in the shelter of privacy and the culture of violence. And it is worse in the case of older women, because we know that this is a common perception and stereotype attitude towards older women, that they are no longer good for reproductive or income generating activities. And in many African countries, aging women, they are considered a witch and burned to death alive. So I would like to know for the UN women, I mean, is there any activity or project to protect the human rights of older women? Because we all know that CEDAW committee has already, adopted the general recommendation on older women. It is called the general recommendation number 27. On the basis of 27, whether any work has started or taken by the UN. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you again. If I understood the question is what can we do? Well, certainly as judges, our hands are limited what we do professionally, and we have to go by the rule of law. And in those states where we have civil rights, we have certain discretion. You know, not all laws are black and white. There are shades of gray. So once you raise a violation of a right, it's a legal right, then we have discretion to apply the circumstances. Now also, as individuals, many of us belong to several organizations. Each woman has a voice. If she does not speak it through herself, she can speak it, as the ambassador says, through her sisters. There are international organizations, and it's like a seed, a domino, where we get the word out about safety projects and avenues that women can go to, and statistics. You want to finish that?
So from a legal perspective, and I hope I'm getting your question right, every state now has both criminal and civil provisions whenever there is domestic violence. And so on a civil basis, the processes in most states are really pretty easy to come in and to get a protective order that can order somebody out of the house, that can order someone not to contact somebody, that can order people into services, whether they are anger management, drug treatment, alcohol treatment.
Push the button when it's green.
As a group and body of women fighting for your right, won't you feel threatened by the fact in the United States the right of vote for black being removed? And what do you feel yourself? And as a body, do you hear me? Should I use the microphone? All right. Well, this is one. Hello. You are out of subject, of context. I'm sorry. Probably you responding to somebody else. I'm Dr. Joel Charles. I'm from Haiti. And I did ask a question. If the body of human that you represented at large fighting for human rights and for women empowerment and women rights. Don't feel threatened by the fact you are here in the United States and the right of vote of black being revoked. And you don't feel threatened that you might be next. And also, what do you do since you in the United Nations as an organization that's supposed to surveil such a right? What do you do? What has been done in that perspective? Thank you.
I think what you're asking is that since they are here, they have more protection than you if you are in your country, the women. But anyway, we have several venues and so on, and that you can go to here and in where your country is, and then the women organization can get together and go through complaining. And so we always support them here. Several organizations here and at the UN and in the country. I think we missed the interpretation. But we thank you so much for a very valuable question, and sorry we could not answer it fully. Anyone else? One more question, if it's, please.
I heard on the news this morning that in the draft of the Afghanistan Constitution, they have included a provision about stoning women for adultery. And I'm just wondering, what can we do to make sure that never comes into the permanent Constitution?
Thank you very much for those last two questions. And one of the important fundamentals that I want to affirm as far as UN Women is concerned is that we seek to promote and protect the rights of women and girls throughout the life course. So whether it is an issue of female feticide or female infanticide or violence against adolescent girls we have heard about, and we know that it is very, very prevalent and unfortunately so, or it is against older women and this whole issue of aging and women's rights. We are very much focused on all of those stages in the life course of women and the rights and the violations of those rights. And of course, as you mentioned very rightly, the CEDAW committee's recommendation, we have been also very much privileged to support that from UN Women's side in all of the general recommendations. And we are therefore there to implement that recommendation through our programmatic work on the ground, through supporting norms, laws, and policies on the ground, as well as internationally in terms of resolutions and agreements. And also we are strongly advocating and raising awareness, and especially when it is the issue of violence against older women, it's about prevention, protection, prosecution of perpetrators, and giving them access to justice, as well as provision of response services. And I think elderly care is one aspect, which is the other side of this coin, but certainly all of the issues that are applicable to some of the other aspects of the life cycle also apply here, but there is additional fragility, as you mentioned, on account of women being physically infirm, sometimes mentally, sometimes disabled. So there are additional factors for discrimination and intersectionality of rights and discrimination. Now on Afghanistan, yes, my friend here is also, Luis, is going to also respond, but constitution making in Afghanistan is something that the UN is very much engaged with and trying to make sure two things, that as the drawdown takes place of the international forces there and the international community's engagement also draws down, UN has to increasingly support three things. One, that in the peace building effort, as well as in the governance structures that are established, constitution, laws, we do not lose the gains that were made in the last few years, particularly for women and girls and their rights, whether it's education, right to education, whether it is ending violence against women, whether it is, because there are also those attempts to, you know, you gave one instance of this, but there are also attempts to, in fact, revoke the law or not implement the law on ending violence against women. So we have to keep, you know, keep on pressing to maintain even the gains that we have. In addition, we have to make sure that continued progress is made in terms of advancing further than even where we are right now. But then the third aspect is, how do we ensure and work with government, how to build the civil society and women's organizations' strength and capacity and bargaining power in this whole equation. So there are these three big challenges. UN is engaged, UN Women has a very strong presence in Afghanistan, but it is a very, very challenging task, and we are very concerned.
Thank you for your alertness. You are absolutely right. Check on the internet. There is what's called the Stop Stoning campaign. And right now, as we sit here, the women in Afghanistan who are involved in that are rallying and doing their very best. But I can also say that stoning occurs in 15 countries in the world. And a 16th country is now being added, and that's Brunei. And so in many of those countries, there is no constitutional segment on stoning, or it will be made illegal and then it will come back, like in Iran. And often it is not a result of a civil action, but in tribal courts and tribal jirgas, and done when no one else knows. So this is a perfect example of violence against women, discrimination against women. We had a panel in Geneva, we had one here in New York, we've got statements from special rapporteurs, but it's the political, religious forces that make this a big challenge.
I want to thank distinguished panelists. We are way over time, but that show that they had wonderful things to say for all of us to hear them and learn. And please continue to follow up on what we are doing. And I thank you again for coming, and I thank the ambassador for co-sponsoring this wonderful event, and all of our panelists, our judges, Ms. Puri and Ms. Lois. Thank you, and please give them a big